Hi, I'm Chris Leone, owner of Garden State Tortoise and educational resource partner for the Turtle Room. Thank you for inviting us to be a part of the annual TSA conference. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I hope you enjoy this video presentation on the captive husbandry, maintenance, and understanding of the Western Hermann's tortoise. The Western Hermann's tortoise, Testudo hermanni, is poorly understood in today's reptile community, mainly because it was ignored for many, many years. Due to the fact that general interest swayed more towards flashier or even easier to obtain species, enthusiasts across the world overlooked these tortoises, thinking they were one and the same thing with their very common cousins, the Eastern Hermann's tortoise, Testudo hermanni boettgeri. So, taking a quick look at the external features of the Western Hermann's tortoise, we can see they've got a small size. These are adult females. They're barely 6 inches. That's typical of most of the locales. And when you flip them over, you can see those two longitudinal jet black bands running along the midline, always separated from each other, and they're usually unbroken. Going back to the carapace, when you look at the back end, on that 5th vertebral scoot, it's reminiscent of a keyhole. It's very defined, and it's found in all locales of the Western subspecies. Now taking a look at the common Eastern subspecies, just looking at them right off the bat, you can see that they're much larger. The degree of contrast is lacking. They do not have the keyhole symbol on the 5th vertebral scoot, and when you flip them over, they have very little black pigment on the plastron in the form of frayed or broken stripes along the plastron. So, when talking about separating the two subspecies, we look at the head, and if you notice, with the Western, they've got that bright yellow subocular spot right there on either side of the head, just underneath the eye. And that's present even in older animals, depending on the locale that they derive from. The Eastern here usually lacks it, except for in young animals. You can see the general size is different, also the degree of contrast. And looking back at the head, the Western's head is sleeker, smaller, and we call it a little more snake-like usually, compared to the bulbous and robust head of the Eastern. Their coloration is an adaptation to the environment, and believe it or not, although they may be strikingly beautiful and vibrant, they effortlessly blend in under bushes and both live or dead surrounding vegetation. They can be literally impossible to see when hiding under a nearby plant or other plant life. The black pigmentation will either maximize or minimize the absorption from the sun, and this is one of the reasons for selecting appropriate plant life for the enclosure. Morning sun seems to be more important to the Western subspecies rather than the Eastern subspecies. I've noted that the Western tortoises will seek cover or refuge at the end of the day sooner than the Eastern subspecies will. The Eastern Hermanns will still be out walking around way past 5, 6, 7 o'clock and seem to turn in just before it actually gets dark, whereas the Westerns have disappeared long before. The Western Hermann's is in fact rare both in most captive collections and in nature, with the IUCN's Red List listing them as endangered. They remain only in small, fragmented, and disjunct populations in Italy, Spain, and France, along with select Mediterranean islands. Western Hermann's follow a daily activity pattern that is similar to other Mediterranean species. They wake up in the early morning, immediately seek out an area drenched with sunlight so they can set out to graze. Since morning sunlight is so important for them to begin their day and aid in thermoregulation, the use of cold frames enable the tortoises to warm up on days when the sun decides to not show up. In the northeastern part of the United States and some other areas, these sun-lacking days may happen more than we'd like to admit. Western hermits are married to the sun in the warm spots they occur in throughout their Mediterranean range. These warm spots are areas with low-lying vegetation where the temperature remains high during the active season. The areas are literally saturated with sunlight. The animals are easily able to warm up very quickly upon sunrise and begin their day. Our tortoises make great use of these cold frames, especially on cloudy days where temperatures may be cooler than what they prefer. Basically, like mini greenhouses, they are made of polycarbonate panels and are very easy to assemble. I cut an entrance hole into the side, situate them onto a wooden or concrete frame, and sink them slightly into the ground. The top of the cold frame has a lid that opens to air them out on very hot days. Inside, they stay warm and relatively humid. The tortoises take to them well, and many females even choose to lay their eggs inside them. Once they reach the desired body temperature, they are able to move out and begin feeding. Cold frames allow the animals to do this on less than desirable days, or even in enclosures that are a bit more of a shaded area. They can be purchased online through both Walmart.com and Amazon.com. Still, whether you use a cold frame or not, it's very important that the enclosure housing the tortoises is placed in an area where it receives, at the very least, a decent amount of sunlight. Proper enclosure placement makes life easier for both the keeper and the tortoise early on. Choosing the sunniest parts of the yard, preferably south-facing, are the best places to choose. Another difference that separates the Western Hermann's tortoise from the eastern subspecies is the fact that they can be considered more delicate. They can fall victim to changes, stress, and diseases rapidly, and they should never be housed with any other type of tortoise, even easterns. Soil consistency is important. Many areas of the United States, especially the Northeast, we get saturated with rain. So what we basically have done is we have removed all of the existing soil in the enclosures and replaced it. I like to use a combination of garden or topsoil, play sand, pit gravel, and oyster shell. It makes it nice and calcium rich. The tortoises can use it, they can burrow into it, and more importantly, the females can easily nest into it. It's easily drainable, which is also very important. Although adaptable and hardy in captivity, the Western Hermann's tortoise is definitely not as strong and hardy as their eastern cousins. They can fall victim to diseases, they can fall victim to dehydration and stress more rapidly than their eastern cousins can. Knowing the behavior the animals are exhibiting is extremely important, which brings us to general maintenance. I'm constantly doing health checks on all the animals at Garden State Tortoise, and the Hermann's tortoises are no exception. Cleaning water dishes, providing fresh food in the form of weeds and commercial diets are extremely important to keep the animals well fed and, on the other hand, hydrated. These tortoises, just like any Mediterranean tortoise, have three major components that need to be met when it comes to giving them an appropriate diet. A diet in high fiber, high calcium, low protein must be met. These items that make up these major components can easily be found in your yard. Broadleaf plantain, clover, lance-leaf plantain, and of course, the thing that we all hate, but is great for our tortoises, dandelion. Now, these weeds are just some of the weeds that are acceptable to feed to these tortoises. Commercial diets such as Missouri are also acceptable, especially when it comes to emaciated animals that need to bulk up fast, those that have just lost a little bit too much weight, and females that have recently laid eggs. It can easily be soaked and then offered to the tortoises in bowls. When it comes to nesting preferences, this is one of the things that separates the Western from the Eastern race of Hermann's tortoise. Western Hermann's tortoises, while sometimes will nest in a more open area, they seem to choose areas near things or even underneath them. They will back into the base of a live or dead grass or bush, and they will excavate the nest there and deposit the eggs. They may go under or near a log or a piece of cork bark, or as I've stated before when talking about the cold frames, a lot of our females in particular will choose to nest inside of them. It seems to give them a sense of security where nobody's looking at them, and also the warmth and humidity inside the greenhouse from the sun hitting it, it seems to make them more comfortable to choose that area. Eastern Hermann's tortoises, on the other hand, they don't seem to be bothered by nesting in a wide open space with anybody or anything looking at them. Westerns seem to be a little bit more secretive in that aspect. When it comes to egg laying and the size of the clutch of eggs, this is yet another reason why the Western is separated from the Eastern race. The Eastern Hermann's tortoise is typically expected to lay between 6 and 8 eggs, whereas there may be fewer or more. Western Hermanns may lay as few as only 1. They may lay 2 or 3, and even up to 4 or 5, depending on the locale that they derive from. But for the most part, you're expecting 1 to 3 eggs, 2 being the mean or average. Although many of these tortoises experience a winter or hibernation in their natural range, some of the locales, such as Sicily or the Balearic Island tortoises, Majorca and Menorca, they actually do not. And if they do, it's very short, maybe 6 to 8 weeks long, and they don't experience extremely frigid temperatures like we do in the Northeast or as some other locales such as Tuscany, Italy. Because of this, we have chosen not to hibernate all of our tortoises, and we have noted that there has been no failures in breeding success or egg laying, and fertility seems to be upwards of 100%. The Eastern Hermann's tortoise, on the other hand, we have noticed that without hibernation, they may or may not produce eggs the following year, and fertility may slip. While Hermann's tortoises in general are not the most prolific or fertile species, it seems that the Western does better without a hibernation than the Eastern does. Again, this is based solely on our experience here. When it comes to breeding, male Testudo hermanni tend to be extremely aggressive. They will take on tortoises, double their size, push them around, and it seems that they do need competition. When there is only one male present in a group of females, he may or may not become bored after time, and it's simply due to the fact that there is no competition. In nature, these tortoises are seeing each other on a regular basis. Daily encounters with members of opposite and the same sex are normal behavior for them. Because of that, we allow males to coincide together at all times. We even let them fight. It's always supervised to make sure that a major injury does not ensue, but it is something that we've noted seems to be quite important to the Western subspecies. While in fact the Western Hermann's tortoise does come from sun-drenched areas with high temperatures and well-drained ground, they should never go without water. Babies in particular are extremely susceptible to dehydration. It can happen almost overnight to a point where they cannot return from the damage done. Adults, on the other hand, are of course hardier, but they should never go without drinking water. We choose to use 2-inch deep stainless steel dishes that are placed throughout each enclosure so that the tortoises have several areas to drink from, or even soak if they feel the need. Dehydration and emaciation can happen rapidly fast with this species. Unlike some other species of tortoises, even some of the Mediterranean, they will come out in a rain, much like a box turtle does. Recognizing behavior in these tortoises is very important. Because they are incapable of showing us how they feel or what they're going through, it's important to be able to recognize certain things. Gravid behavior is one of the more easy behaviors to notice. The female Western Hermann's tortoises will become extremely restless. They will pace for sometimes weeks, trying to find the best nesting area. This is again why soil composition is extremely important for them. They will not continue to nest in an area where they're hitting snags or rocks or roots. They must have a clear passage to dig down into and deposit the eggs. If they're becoming extremely relentless and there are test holes dug everywhere, this is a sure sign that the animals are not happy and they're not finding an appropriate area. Eastern Hermann's tortoises, which are typically a bigger, stronger animal, can usually excavate the ground much easier. They too should be prevented from hitting any kind of obstructions while doing so, but they seem to be a little bit more passive and calm when it comes to selecting a nesting area. Due to the extreme aggression that can be exhibited by male Western Hermann's tortoises, it can be fairly easy to notice when one is stressed out. Females may choose to start hiding in dark corners, not coming out from scrapes that they've made in the base of plants or grasses, or they may spend too much time inside the greenhouse or cold frames that you provide them. This can be due to the fact that both males or other females are becoming too aggressive for them. It's important to note these differences. To replicate nature, we choose to keep the sexes together throughout most of the year. However, during certain times of the year, such as when the females are expected to lay their eggs, it's sometimes wise to separate the sexes. The females need to be in a stress-free environment in order to safely and accurately lay their eggs. So, when it comes to maintenance, it's not just about, the day-to-day care of them. Here at Garden State Tortoise, we maintain several distinct and specific localities of Western Hermann's tortoise. Now, I'm just going to show you three real quick, but we have mainland Italy here. This tortoise is from Apulia. This is the Italian island tortoise. This one is from Sicily. And this one right here is a Spanish island tortoise from the Balearic Islands, Majorca. There are somewhat distinct differences between all the locales. Some are a little more similar than others, which we discuss on the site, hermanni-haven.com, and in the North American Regional Studbook. In the last few years, we have been successful in creating the first ever North American Regional Studbook for Testudo hermanni. This has enabled us to keep track and closely monitor the production and survival of them in the USA. Most recently, we were granted the chance to do genetic testing on the majority of the Western Hermann's tortoises in the studbook, including every single one of them that reside at my facility. Thanks to the Henry Dorley Zoo's genetic department, new doors have been opened to the actual differences between not only the subspecies of Hermann's tortoise, but between the various geographical strains of the Western subspecies. In the year to come, I hope to release a full report on our findings. So, in conclusion, it's not just external traits that separate the Western subspecies from the Eastern. It goes as far as genetics and even behavioral traits. I hope you guys were able to gain something from this video, but there's a world of differences and information out there pertaining to Hermanns and other species of colonians worldwide. For all your turtle and tortoise needs, please visit theTurtleRoom.com, GardenStateTortoise.com, and for anything concerning the Hermanns, please visit hermanni-haven.com. I hope you guys enjoyed the conference. Thank you.